Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
These are patriotic Canadians.
Oh my God!
You're now attacking different older people.
Hold the line! You guys are disgusting!
Look at the fucking news media. Look. Look. You coward! You sound like
Our lives on the line. We have nowhere else to go.
My phone dropped.
Practicing
Back there.
I hope it wasn't.
Anybody with us? I see you shaking your head back there. You should be watching this. Take a lesson in courage.
Man, they declared this called the Crusade.
Cowards!
Nazi supporters.
Child generation theory. Every generation. Law enforcement professionals, huh?
Oh, you got blown up in Afghanistan, eh? And these guys are going to arrest you and push you back when you serve for your country?
Right. You guys keep those actions. Resign everybody else to serve them. Go for it.
I don't smoke. I'm dying. Your children. You don't know my life. You don't know my struggle. I fought for my shit. I survived the worst. This is nothing.
Tell your boss to stop it, huh?
I've been
Follow
blown
the
up.
law.
Peace and love. And if
No
you think
respect for
does,
human dignity
you're wrong.
whatsoever. We're not livestock to make rich boomers. All serial killers are boomers. I almost said that.
We love you all.
All they want is to be heard.
Can I take a second?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I need a minute.
You are not a serf.
I did surfing once. Oh man, I hurt myself big too.
No. You don't want to go SERF. That's what these guys want you to do. They want you to go SERF.
Oh.
Nuremberg 2, boys. Can't wait to see you there.
I don't want to be here.
You guys' grandchildren are going to be born
I'm much
in
rather be
debt,
home with my wife and kids.
owing a piece of their lives to the state. That's a wounded veteran!
Yes!
That's a wounded veteran!
Yes,
That's a wounded warrior right there! They got a kid in the fucking head! Back up! Back up! Back up! Back up!
Hold on, stop pushing.
Back up! They kicked him in the leg. Back up! Back up!
Hold on, stop pushing.
They kicked him in the leg. The RCR guy. They booted him. That one. Where's the one? The one who booted him was this one. Kucher Lazon. He kicked the vet that had the wounded right leg. He kicked him right in the leg. Oh, he's a greasy one. This guy right here. Kucher Lazon. He kicked him.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Saw you kicking that wounded veteran while he was down there earlier. You guys are a bunch of thugs, huh? No, not at all. You want to keep the rich guys in power right now, huh? Soaking up all the wealth, buying up all those residential properties, turning the millennials into a bunch of permanent renters, reaching into the pockets of the unborn, resigning all future children to be born into serfdom. That's you guys. Abusing your citizens, huh? Just following orders, just like those guards at the ovens of Auschwitz. That's you. Right? You just do as you're told, right?
Moi, j'ai pas la même opinion.
These guys are getting in.
Hey, what's up, troops? This is Jeff Evely, Ops Sgt-Maj with Veterans for Freedom, back with you now on this 19th day of December 2023. Lots going on as usual. I see we have all the usuals, or all the regulars aboard with us here today. It's good to see everybody. Cindy's saying JM trying to pronounce magnanimous last night was hysterical. Yeah, somebody made me out there. That was pretty cool. So I asked a question on what do you call it? Or I made a comment on Jeremy's podcast there last night, and of course, I threw in all the usual kind of perspicacity that I try to bring to my audience. A couple of words there, I think maybe were a little over the top, but that's okay. What were they? They were magnanimous and megalomaniac, but. It's all good. We'll power through this, and let's dive right into it, folks. So here is our philosophy meme for the day. So this is from Philosophical Rhythms. They're really good there on Facebook. And it's coming from Diogenes. And he says, of what use is a philosopher who doesn't hurt anybody's feelings? And Diogenes, he's one of the ancient Greeks, so he's a classic. And he's one of the founding philosophers of the school of cynicism. And I'm always talking about this on the program, where I'm saying I think our ancestors had this figured out. It's about strong minds, strong citizens, and they founded the schools out of the teaching, like out of the teachings of Socrates came the schools of cynicism and stoicism. And I think if you really want to weather the storm through the current fourth turning, that we should probably get back to our roots as a civilization, Western civilization, and get back to our philosophical roots of stoicism and cynicism. And I think we'll be just fine if everybody embraces that. So. Here's our meme for the day. This is coming courtesy of the Ferryman's Toll, who's a friend of the program. We've had him on here a while back there, and I wonder might be time for a follow up. But here we go. It says conservative MPs who do not support further aid to Ukraine, and we have a blank page here. So. I'm always pointing to this as well. I'm kind of saying that all the parties are serving the same establishment, and we basically have Kabuki theater where we should have politics right now. The people out in front of this, the politicians, they're basically just marionettes on the stage, and we're after those shadowy figures, the puppet masters. It's a reference to Japanese theater where the puppet masters wear a zintai. I better look that up. Is it called a zintai that they wear? It's but it's a black, cover, all covering kind of leotard, and they manipulate the life-size marionettes on stage, and that's pretty much what we have going on in Canada right now. And I'm always pointing out that the people that are at peak power in our institutions are those shadowy figures on stage. So that's the Janice Charrettes and the chief of the Privy Council office, the generals in the military, the commissioner of the RCMP, the deans of the university. Those are the kind of puppet masters, really. And that's the boomer generation. Okay, so. Speaking of Ukraine, here we have courtesy of True North. That was yesterday, January 18th. Canada gives 200 armored vehicles to Ukraine. So get a load of this picture. I had to go kind of look this up and see what the heck's going on with this. But those are some pretty serious looking Jeeps that we're sending off to you, and they're brand new. So Canada is donating 200 armored vehicles to Ukraine after the country recently requested tanks to assist in defending itself from Russia. Defense Minister Anita Anand made the announcement while visiting Ukraine defense officials in the capital of Kiev. And everybody's saying Kyiv. I know that's how it's said in the Ukraine, but I'm Anglo, and in English we say Kiev. So that's a current thing, kind of behavior, I think, when everybody starts adopting a different pronunciation like that. So back to the article. The vehicles, Senator armed personnel carriers are multi-purpose four-wheeler designed for Border Patrol operations. The 200 are valued at $90 million. Quote, during today's productive visit to Kiev, I met with Ukrainian officials to learn about Ukraine's most pressing security needs and to reaffirm Canada's steadfast support, close quote, said Anand. Interesting. The announcement comes after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Monday that the government was still considering a separate request from Ukraine for Leopard 2 tanks. Canada acquired 100 Leopard 2 tanks 16 years ago. Officials estimated the deal would cost $1.3 billion, according to the purchase price of a long-term maintenance. The purchase price and the long-term maintenance. The fleet tanks would make at least the third military donation to Ukraine this month. Defense Minister Anita Anand announced last week a missile launching system purchased directly from the United States to give to Ukraine. The missile system and its munitions were estimated at roughly $406 million in value. Quote, Canada will continue to collaborate with the United States as well as other allies and partners to address Ukraine's defense priorities in the short and long term, close quote, Anand said. The Canadian government has donated $1 billion in the last 12 months for military assistance towards the war in Ukraine and $4 billion for financial, humanitarian, and other assistance. So, wow. $5 billion in the last month? Is that what they're saying? Yeah. Last 12 months. $5 billion in the last 12 months. And I had to kind of go and look at this for myself, but these are some pretty impressive. They're called the Senator Armored Personnel Carriers. So I went and pulled that up. Here's the website for Senator, and this is their product page, and this is the Senator Armored Personnel Carrier, APC. It's a high-performance, multi-purpose armored personnel carrier designed for law enforcement and border patrol operations. So there you go. That's what we're buying them. It's a modular solution for your operational needs. So modular just means like you can probably like change out like different parts on the, like a Jeep. That's what you do with a Jeep, right? You can get different doors, and you can get different, maybe put a soft top on this sucker, so you can let the roof down when it's hot outside and get the wind in your flowing hair. All right. So, the Senator APC is a Rochel's flagship model, able to serve a wide variety of scenarios efficiently. Rochel design is a high-performance, multi-purpose armored personnel carrier specifically for law enforcement and border patrol applications. The Senator APC is a unique product in terms of technical characteristics, design, and assembly. By implementing modular design, Rochel has created a vehicular platform able to support a wide range of operational scenarios, including but not limited to armored personnel carriers, mobile command and control units, law enforcement vehicles, medical evacuation vehicles, and others. The Senator APC is characterized by a high degree of maneuverability with a small turning radius, and making it an ideal choice for urban environments. Yeah, that sounds about right. Urban environments. It's kind of like a Humvee, really. By utilizing innovative lightweight composite materials, Rochel ensures the highest performance and mobility, and blah, blah, blah. It's a really great product, I am sure. And I guess in light of the fact that they were requesting the Leopard 2 tanks, maybe this is kind of, if you're a progressive, this seems like a pretty good capitulation, a good, token, I guess. It's not a token. This is a serious ass machine. But in light of the fact that they're asking for tanks, and the thing is that if we start sending them tanks, that looks an awful lot like World War III over there in Europe. And Russia, I don't know what it's like these days, but last time I checked, they had more tanks. The Red Army had more tanks than all of NATO combined. And that's kind of why we need the nuclear option and the air superiority, because Russia likes to think, at least, that if there's anybody that can take on the United States in a ground war, it still is Russia. Here's another meme that I saw on Ferry's page here. It says, conservative MPs who have publicly denounced drag shows for children. And again, it's a blank post or a blank page. And this is courtesy of the Ferryman's Toll. So here's the Western Standard, and they're saying Alberta transgender wants maid after sexual reassignment surgery goes sour. This is something that I've talked about on the program before. I mean, we have a situation right now where the boomer-controlled school boards are imposing this sexually deranging dogma on the children in our schools, concurrent to them telling them that their civilization is evil and colonialist, and they should apologize for being born white and repent and atone for the sins of their civilization. It's a form of original sin, and they should atone for that and cast off their previous culture and life and give themselves over to the one true faith of wokeism. No better way to do that and get that diversity card to secure your position in the cult, of course, than believing and abiding in the dogma of boys can be girls and girls can be boys, turning those children into permanent medical patients and livestock for big pharma. So now it's coming full circle in several different themes we've been covering here on the program. Maid, having been offered to veterans and acknowledged, only to have that acknowledgement retracted. And the minister later said, no, that never happened, even after he said that they would be investigating it. Here we have Alberta transgender wants maid after sexual reassignment surgery goes sour. And I've talked about detransitioners here on the program before, and they've gotten kicked off of Reddit and all the major platforms and stuff like that. We're talking about kids who got exploited through this process, and they want to tell their story so that others can make a more fully informed decision, which is a necessary constituent of informed consent. Pretty tough to give informed consent when you're, a teenager, by the way, an adolescent, especially these days, because it does take longer for people to grow up in a more complex society. That's just a fact of the matter. The more complex your society gets, the longer it takes for people to fully mature, to become fully functional in that society. So, that's why not a lot of 14-year-olds own farms anymore, that sort of thing. So anyway, this is a really kind of dark, I think, intersection of a few different themes that we've been covering on the program here. So let's dive right into it. Quote, Duchess Lois made an announcement on January 17th, tweet, already viewed more than 45,000 times. Quote, I'm accessing MAID as a sterilized First Nations person of Treaty 6 who is also a post-op transsexual woman of 14 years. I qualify for it as someone who is sterilized and who has undergone vaginoplasty. Two things that cannot be reversed or relieved, close quote. She wrote in the tweet. So that would be, I think she's making reference to a couple of criteria required under like new MAID laws, where it's no longer medical assistance in dying because she's not dying. So they're not assisting her in her death. They're not making her comfortable. They're not facilitating a death that's going to take place anyway. They're actively killing this person. So, and she's making reference to some of the criteria that are required under the new laws, reversed or relieved. So these are two things that cannot be reversed or relieved. So now this is a condition that she has that's the result of her having been indoctrinated and exploited as a very young, vulnerable person. So Lois posted a screenshot of an eligible condition for the eligible conditions for MAID. I am applying. I have the application, but I need one witness. But there is also the process of if there is no witness, so I might just inquire about that option. Quote, as soon as I submit, then the official process begins of the assessments, close quote. In her profile, Lois of Alberta said she knew sexual reassignment surgery was a mistake. Quote, in 2009, I was rushed into having SRS before I was ready, SRS being sexual reassignment surgery, resulting in immediate regret and sterilization, close quote. Immediate regret and sterilization. Wow, close quote. Lois's thread announcing her decision to pursue MAID explains more of her story. Quote, the last couple of years were very intense medically for me when I experienced depth loss in June 2021, and I had to add a second dilation to my weekly routine to help myself. The doctor wasn't concerned, as she put it, quote, we as females experience vaginal atrophy, close quote. No, I don't think that a natal female has to worry about her vagina growing over if she doesn't keep sticking stuff up there. That's what's happening here when she says, and I had to go back and kind of look at it again for a second, depth loss. I think that's what we're talking about is the wound that's been created to simulate a vagina is still a wound, and that's how the body is going to treat it for the rest of your life. And that's what's only part of what makes this person a permanent medical patient at this point. And people are getting rich off of this stuff. And hedge funds, pension funds, they invest in all these kinds of things. So anyway, back to the article. Lois was experiencing pain, but her request to see a specialist was unheeded by the doctor, who instead referred her to a gender clinic in Edmonton. In December 2021, she had a phone appointment. Quote, we spoke about my hormones. That's another issue. Then the pain and dilating. A referral was made to a specialist finally, she recalled. Quote, 2022 came. I was referred to the Lois Hole Hospital for Women about my hole. It was a phone consultation, nothing more. I was relabeled from homosexual to asexual by a doctor. Interesting. Lois's problems continued. Quote, then came June 2022. I experienced a rare event of confusional migraine that lasted 22 days. And during that time, I forgot which genitalia I had, and it caused so much stress. And I was in and out of the hospital, and I tried to raise this concern with several doctors, close quote, Lois recalled. Quote, it was brushed off. I was so confused as to why I didn't have a penis anymore. Then was the tipping point for me. It's what changed my life and mind that I can no longer trust this medical system that is captured by gender identity ideologues. So this is somebody who's undergone the process saying this, okay? Captured by gender identity ideologues. And that's true across the board, starting at the university. Quote, it has killed the Indian, close quote. In the next tweet on the thread, Lois said, quote, so yes, I qualify as a sterilized Indian who has had a vaginoplasty, then, quote, close quote, then typed the national anthem along with the icon of the Canadian flag. A tweeter named Liam Danger Park tried to intervene. Quote, your story can save lives. Hold on, close quote, he said. To this, Duchess Lois replied, quote, I am using my story and experience to ensure this never happens to anybody else, close quote. After others made subsequent pleas that Lois would live, she wrote, quote, I'm still here fighting. We need all levels of government to see this and see what is happening within our country, close quote. Another tweeter named Al Bubu offered Lois something to think about. Quote, have you considered that the MAID program is a bit similar to the transition process in that the activist-driven and that it is activist-driven and offering some solution, just an opinion, but from here it feels similar, close quote. Spot on. Good job on to Al Bubu there, because that's a pretty good statement, I think. I would say the same thing. People are getting rich off of both of these things. They're just exploiting people. They're turning them into permanent medical patients. And if they don't want to live that way, then we can offer them MAID. And I haven't traced all the financial incentives for MAID or anything like that, but these are drugs that they're giving people. They're products, right? And also, it's clearly it's ideological driven. It's a death cult for crying out loud. It's misogynistic, as in anti-human. So if JM happens to be watching. Okay, so that's Jeremy. So Lois was not persuaded. Lois was not persuaded. Quote, I get to be free. I'm not scared. I'm just tired of suffering, close quote, she wrote. Another tweeter, Jay Reed, said, quote, things will get better. The world needs you, and you have to purpose in this, and you have to have a purpose in this world. In some shape or form, you have to have a purpose, close quote. Lois replied, quote, maybe this is my purpose, albeit a time purpose, but it's still a purpose nonetheless, close quote. The thread already captured the attention of U.S. psychologist Carolyn Borensenko, who wrote about it in her Substack, Actively Unwoke. She said she hoped Lois could find peace, but believed others share the same responsibility for her condition. Some responsibility for her condition. Quote, yes, the far left and the radical gender industry are to blame for not stopping this before it got to surgery. That's true, close quote, wrote Borensenko. Quote, but the media and the mainstream journalists, the ones who work at the so-called credible publications and networks, should have been on this years ago. It should have been wall-to-wall coverage warning people of what was happening. They have the biggest reach into the land of the normies, and they have a responsibility to use it. Quote, it was discovered mostly by independent journalists, close quote. Yeah, and that is what happens in a fourth turning. Our institutions across the board are essentially co-opted for the purposes of whatever purposes the people in charge, their own ends as opposed to public service. And that at this moment in our history is the boomer generation. And well, as we saw in the Somalia affair, they all stick together and throw the little guy under the bus like they did to Kyle Brown. Okay, so here's CBC News, and this is a story. Now, we've covered the Kamloops Color Revolution Commie Connection here on the podcast before. I had William Ray on here to talk about the color revolution aspect of it in particular, but this is a kind of divide and conquer strategy that the world's elites are into at this particular moment. I'm not sure if it's necessarily coming out of Beijing, but I just kind of have that sense that it is. And well, not just that I have a sense that it is, it's the rhetoric that comes from Beijing. A lot of the stuff about anti-colonialism, I think, is rooted there. And in particular, the narrative about the Brits introducing opium to China by force, which is not true. We talk about it, we teach it in our schools like it's the Opium Wars, but it really had more to do with the internment of British citizens and the treatment of British citizens engaged in good faith commerce and evangelism, Christian missionaries and stuff like that. They interned them, and yeah, there was some opium. That was a lot of opium. That was part of the cache of goods that they seized. But at the end of the day, it was about being treated as an equal power, and the opium is not mentioned anywhere in the parliamentary debate, declaration of war, or the treaties that they signed. So, so that's why I'm kind of putting that lens over a lot of the narrative that comes out. Is I'm always kind of saying, well, how does it serve Beijing? And what I saw in the U.S. in the wake of the fentanyl overdose of George Floyd was, they're pushing on those seams in the cultural mosaic. I know it's the melting pot down there, but yeah, they try to pit all the different ethnicities and different groups off each other and stoke a bunch of racial division and whatever way they can divide people, or even inventing new ways, new lines to draw intersectionally to divide people into smaller and smaller groups and pit them against each other. It's all part and parcel with the art of war, Sun Tzu, 500 BC. And the racial thing didn't really take hold right away in Canada. They couldn't do the Black Lives Matter stuff here. It didn't seem to take hold. I saw them a bunch of times, Toronto protests and stuff like this, where they're trying to kind of whip people into this same frenzy that we see in the United States, where all the Democrat cities are burning in the wake of the fentanyl overdose of George Floyd. And in the Summer of Love protests, Black Lives Matter, which is an openly communist group. And it didn't really take hold here because we don't see ourselves as having that same history of slavery. We banned it as part of the British Empire 3 years before the Americans did. And And so it doesn't really fit with our narrative, our kind of founding narrative as a country. We're still kind of remnant of the British Empire that was seen as a bulwark against American expansionism initially. So we tend to start out from a position of being anti-American, I'm afraid. But anyway, so this is a throwback to the Kamloops Color Economy Revolution, where they're using the colonialism instead of the slavery, the history of slavery, as a means of gaslighting us and getting all the different groups pitted against each other, hating each other, at each other's throats. And the thing that's freshest in people's minds, because we just did the Truth and Reconciliation Commission there back in the in the 2000s, we have a report that says we're going to look for these missing graveyards, these abandoned graveyards. And this has everything to do, like, these would have been community graveyards for the most part, as in all different ethnicities all kind of buried together, because that's just a service that the church provided back then. Some of these communities didn't really have the means to even have graveyards. Resources were a hell of a lot more scarce back then. So this is the theme that they want to push on. It's the residential school one, and they gave us the hoax of the mass grave at the Kamloops residential school, and we have yet to see any evidence of human remains in what was a radar picture of a soil disruption in a particular location on Kamloops. And I think it was TNC that reported on the fact that was it was excavated for another purpose. Previously, it might have been, I can't remember what it was, a septic bed or something like that, but they had documentation to show that was a project that had nothing to do with any burying anybody. But okay, so here's the CBC, and they're saying, warning, this story contains distressing details. Wasuwakon Ognim Nation says ground penetrating radar has detected more than 170 anomalies during the search for unmarked graves at the sites of a former residential school in Kenora, Ontario. Okay, so at least this time they're saying it's 170 anomalies, because the last time they found a soil disruption, an anomaly in the soil, and this ground penetrating radar is really more like the last one anyway. It was kind of more like a hobbyist's model of a ground penetrating radar. It wasn't like a drone in the sky or something like that. And they were saying that there were, what was the number of bodies they said? 200 and I should have looked that up. I forget now. But anyway, they were saying hundreds of children were buried in this mass grave based on that soil disruption. And now they're saying 170 anomalies during a search for unmarked graves. So that's a step in the right direction, at least. So they're not coming at it as viciously with the gaslighting as they were the last time. And what I find so interesting here is the comments. Okay, so if you just scroll down and look at some of these comments on this article, Nate McGee says, breaking news, possible graves found in old cemetery. Yeah, that's right. So I think people are out there are waking up quite a bit, and fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And here's Chad Halifax, and he's saying, I don't understand any of this. They found a bunch of burials in the cemetery without jumping to any conclusions. Do people really want to dig up these plots to still get no answers? At what is the point of all of this? Not to be rude, but this all seems to be a waste of time and money. That's one take anyway, but it was in the Truth and Reconciliation report, though, that we were going to go looking for the lost graves. Okay, so anyway, people are getting skeptical, and that's good to see. Oh wait, let me just give that a click real quick, and we'll see what they say in the article. So this is what they're presenting, and it says Wet'suwet'en Ognim Nation says ground penetrating radar has detected more than 170 anomalies during a search for unmarked graves at the site of a former residential school in Kenora, Ontario. The anomalies, referred to as, quote, plausible burials, close quote, were found in a cemetery grounds associated with the former St. Mary's Indian Residential School. Wet'suwet'en Ognim Nation said in, am I saying that right? Wasuwakon Washwesk, I guess. Sorry, guys. Said in media release Tuesday. The search began in May. With the exception of 5 grave markers, the remaining are unmarked by any grave burial markers, close quote, the release said. The site has been secured consistent with the nation's Anishinaabe protocols. The Washwesk Ognum chief said, Chris Skeed told CBC News the searches of the site are, quote, survivor driven. Close quote. Here in Washwesk, Ognum, we have a little over 50 survivors that would have attended the 40s, 50s, 60s, and basically went when it closed. He said Tuesday. Quote: They were difficult discussions, obviously, because you're going back in time to when they were children, which obviously wasn't a safe time to be an Anishinaabe, but with the policy from the Crown government. Okay. Just with the policy from the Crown government. So I'm not going to go through the whole article because it's CBC, so they're always trying to spin a narrative. We know that, but I do see that they're not as aggressive, right? They're not trying to spin this one as some kind of a mass murder or genocide. That's what we saw the last time. It said no pride in genocide. That's what people were going around saying, and there's yet to be a single body even so much as exhumed, any confirmation that there are human remains under that soil disruption that was found by the ground penetrating radar. But they're saying plausible burials because that is what we're looking for. We're looking for lost graveyards that probably had, so with the exception of 5 grave markers, the remaining are unmarked by any grave or burial markers. Now, a lot of times, and we're talking about times of scarcity here, so a lot of times they might have been something like a wooden cross to mark the grave, and those are gone, and that's why these graveyards are lost. So that's encouraging to see the CBC kind of backing down a little bit on all this Canadians are racist stuff. So here's Dr. Leslyn Lewis, and she says in November 2020, while Canadians were distracted by COVID, the Liberal government signed a World Economic Forum initiated charter. The Agile Nations Charter will facilitate agile, quote, rulemaking, close quote, outside of Parliament. Why the secrecy? So that's a pretty good catch on behalf of or on the part of Dr. Leslyn Lewis, and here's her inquiry of ministry and the inquiry of ministry, and she's submitting these documents and getting this response. Let's see what they say here. Canada was among the 7 countries invited to the panel on agile governance for the post-pandemic world in November 2020, convened jointly by the World Economic Forum and Organization for Economic OECD. The panel will bring together ministers from Canada, Denmark, Italy, Japan, Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom, as well as senior representatives from several private sector companies for discussions in agile regulation and emerging technologies. The preparatory meetings convened in the OECD and the WEF. Representatives from different governments invited to the panel, including Canada and industry, introduced and discussed a number of proposals for joint action. That's fascism. They say public-private partnerships. Yeah, that's their euphemism for fascism. Because that's what fascism is. It's the lucrative merger of corporation and state. The United Kingdom proposed Agile Nations as a form of collaboration and informed and information sharing on regulatory innovation. Canada expressed support for the proposal and provided input on early drafts of the charter to inform the final version that was signed in November 2020. Okay, so we're deep in bed here with the WEF, or at least they are anyway. How much are the rest of us really bound by this? So far, probably not much. But let's see. With which stakeholders did a consultation and proposed Agile Nations Charter take place? Okay. In addition to participating governments, the following organizations took part in discussions on the proposed Agile Nations Charter: Facebook, IBM, Siemens, Sherlock Biosciences, Suede Labs, Volvo Group, and Wingcopter. I don't know who Wingcopter is. But Facebook right at the top of the list. Facebook and IBM. What do you make of that? Okay, so go ahead and check that out on her profile or on her Twitter there. That's Dr. Leslyn Lewis, Conservative MP. And here's a clip. They're saying breaking news: Conservative MP Kusi goes full GI Jane on Liberal McKinsey contracts. So we're seeing. I'm going to tie this together, but we're seeing this kind of these. Almost, yeah, they're written agreements between our political leadership and the WEF, where they're getting together with all of these stakeholders, so-called, in industry. And it's a kind of organic fascism that's out in the open. And I think they're so blissfully lacking in self-awareness, they can't even see themselves, what they're doing. But okay, this is another piece of this, but check this out.
The former global managing partner for McKinsey and led a 30-year career with the firm. While he was working with McKinsey, he was closely connected with the Liberal government and served as the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau prior to his retirement from the company in 2018. Shortly after he retired from McKinsey, he was then appointed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to serve as Canada's ambassador to China. Let me tell you, going through the Foreign Service, that is a plum post and not easy to get. But so it's evident where these ideas come from, where the idea to bring in.
So I just want to pause that for 1 second, because I think I might have skipped ahead of one little chunk of video there. But she's talking about Dominic Barton. Okay, this former head of McKinsey, whatever he was, and he is a swamp creature because, well, I'll just let her talk a little bit more about it, because he's getting rich. We have these consulting contracts now that they went and pushed through. This is all part of the initiative to loot the public coffers while everybody's scared of COVID, and just steal all of the taxpayers' money and send it off to their friends. So they send it all off to Dominic Barton's McKinsey group, and he's the guy that was handpicked by Trudeau to be the ambassador to China. He brokered the deal to get the two Michaels released. That took him 2 years. Great job, guys. I mean, I can't think of another time in history when we've been so weak, I think, geopolitically. So anyway, this Dominic Barton, he's quite central to all this. He's a big swamp creature. Check him out.
McKinsey came from. It came from the very top. And guess what? I'm not the only one who sees it. The individuals who signed that letter to ask for this meeting today aren't the only ones who see it. The media sees this as well. I'm going to quote from the Ottawa bureau chief of the Globe and Mail, Bob Fife's comments on CTV's question period this past Sunday. These are the words out of Mr. Fife's mouth. They got these contracts. They got them because Dominic Barton is a buddy of the Prime Minister. Bob Fife's words, not mine. And he goes on to say more, that this is what it looks like. He also said that Dominic Barton advised him on the infrastructure bank, which also, by the way, has been a flop. So it's no secret where these ideas are coming from. They're coming from the top, and they're coming from the top, and they're permeating all throughout government, because we're seeing more and more media stories where more departments within the Canadian government are implementing McKinsey as part of what should be solutions, but we're seeing it's not. We're seeing this in defense. We're seeing this in immigration. We're seeing this in health. We're seeing this in different agencies under industry. This is not a single department issue. This is coming from the top with its tentacles permeating throughout government. So it's very clear.
So this is, I'm just going to throw this. Let me see now. So Dominic Barton, he's one of these guys that's a little bit, maybe a little trickier to pin down, whether he's a first wave Gen Xer or a boomer. By the pop culture definition, we see he's boomer because he's born in 62. I think I would kind of have to see him in action to really get a better assessment of it. But he could, by Strauss-Howe generational theory, like a strict definition of up until 1961 would be boomers. So this would be like a first year, first wave Gen Xer is probably the most we could stretch the definition of a Gen Xer for that to work. But he is at peak institutional power. That's what I'm saying here is it's not the political class. It's not the politicians that we're after here. It's guys like Dominic Barton, the guys running our institutions right now, the ones that are at peak institutional power, because it's a tail wagging the dog scenario here. And like I said, these are the puppet masters. Okay. Dominic Barton, he's a guy, one of the Kabuki theater marionette masters that is dressed in his black sentai, and he's one of the shadowy figures in the background who's pulling the strings of all of government. And Trudeau is just kind of his little buddy that he can call up for favors here and there. And it's kind of his agenda, that we're really pursuing as a country right now. So
Where
here is the Real Andy Lee show, and she says, while we were asking questions about McKinsey and consulting, can we find out what a $150,000 payment from the Global Affairs Canada to Dominic Barton, the former director of McKinsey and Canadian ambassador to the People's Republic of China, listed under, quote, other services, close quote, was for? That's a pretty great question, I think. Real Andy Lee show. Andy Lee, give her a follow. She's been solid throughout all this stuff. So yeah, this is the swamp in action, folks. And it's all coming to light. I think that I've been saying, like, the cracks in the dam are forming. We're seeing more and more of this stuff come out every day. This is the interview that our Conservative MP on the 2 clips ago there referenced when she said that Dominic Barton got flamed here on CTV. So here we go.
Aside from the Prime Minister's personal friendship with Dominic Barton, let's look at this company. They had to pay $560 million because for working for a big U.S. farmer called Purdue, which advised them to supercharge sales of opioids that killed tens of thousands of Americans. They were just recently charged in South Africa in a corruption scandal, which they already had to pay $100 million back. They helped Saudi Arabia target online protesters. In 2018, for example, they held an executive retreat at a Chinese internment camp that holds hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs. Now, let's think about this for a second. If the Conservatives had given a contract to
I did run that down a little bit. I don't have all the references pulled up for the program today, but I think that's it was in the same region as the Chinese internment camp. I don't think it was actually, like, they weren't sharing a cafeteria with the internees or anything like that. I don't think they were looking down into the salt mines where they were all working artisanally to feed the Chinese dragon. But yeah, it's all very shady.
Company like this, the Liberals will be screaming at the top of their lungs. The Prime Minister always likes to extol great Canadian values. He'd be saying you can't deal with a company that has no moral compass. So the question is, why are we dealing with this company? They got these contracts because they weren't getting them before. They got them because Dominic Barton's a buddy of the Prime Minister.
And we don't know that, to be clear.
No, but that's what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
And he also advised them on the infrastructure bank, which, by the way, has been a flop. So there's another example of, okay, maybe they're a bunch of smart guys with PhDs, but their track record in terms of morality and ethics is is very, very questionable. And we have to ask as Canadians, do we really want to be associated with a company like that? I think the opposition parties are saying, all 3 opposition parties united, are saying, no, we shouldn't be.
Okay, so there you go. Even the establishment is screaming about this at this point. So that's a good sign. Now, I'm just going to point out again that the investment class is kind of the problem here. It has been since 2008 when we entered the fourth turning with the global financial collapse, and that was the result of the mortgage bond market crisis that was created by the boomer investment class after Boomer Clinton removed the law that prevented them from doing exactly that. It created a massive bubble that destroyed a lot of lives. And when they reached peak institutional power and it all came crashing down, they took a bailout from the taxpayer to pay themselves bonuses and laid off all the younger generations working in the trades. So it's the same investment class. That's why we're seeing things go like this. And they're using their economic wealth and influence to exploit the people coming up behind them, reaching into our institutions to loot the public coffers and co-opt our public service for their own pet projects. So, hello. Come on, computer. Here we go. So here's, Here is CBC. They're reporting MPs will call 7 cabinet ministers to testify on the $100 million in contracts awarded to McKinsey. Parliamentary committee asked for all contracts, invoices awarded to the firm since 2011. So this is the CBC. They're reporting on it, and apparently this is so big and so obvious that everybody. Even the CBC is getting in on this action, so that's good. 7 senior cabinet ministers will be called before a parliamentary committee to explain why their departments have issued more than $100 million in consulting contracts to McKinsey companies since the Trudeau government came to power in 2015. The news comes after Radio Canada revealed that the Liberal government awarded $66 million in business to the firm, a number that rises to $100 million when new contracts signed in recent months are included in the total. So they went from $66 million to $100 million. That's an added $34 million in contracts while we were all scared to death of this pandemic. Okay. McKinsey, an American firm with 30,000 consultants and 130 offices in 65 countries, provides advice to both private and public entities. The 9 years of the Harper government, McKinsey was awarded $2.2 million in federal contracts. Wow. So in 9 years, $2.2 million, and we're going to $100 million, 50 times as much in 7 years, so less time, going on 8 years at this point. So still 50 times as much in just a little bit less time. So MPs in the House of Commons Government Operations and Estimates Committee said they also want to hear testimony from the most senior McKinsey executive in Canada and from McKinsey's former global management director, Dominique Barton. I'm sure it'll be just like the WE scandal guys, the WE charity guys. Yeah. Barton, who worked for the firm for 30 years, left in 2018, was appointed Canada's ambassador to China in 2019. Barton held the position for 2 years before leaving to join the mining firm in Rio Tinto. What is the mining firm in Rio Tinto? I'm curious about that now. So yeah, I mean, as we can see, this guy has very close ties to Beijing. He's got all kinds of contacts over there, and he's rich. I'm sure he just loves the kind of access that he gets to those massive Chinese markets. Okay, on Wednesday, the committee met and passed a motion listing to the ministers being called to testify. So we have the president of the Treasury Board, Mona Fortier, Public Services and Procurement Minister, Helen Jacek, and Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, the super minister, and Defense Minister, Anita Anand, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Minister, Sean Fraser, Health Minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, and Public Safety Minister, Marco Mendicino. Oh, yeah. Each of the ministers is expected to give an opening statement and face 3 rounds of questions. Each minister's appearance is expected to last a little longer than an hour. Members of the committee will have until Tuesday, January 24th to submit lists of additional witnesses. The committee will begin hearing from witnesses over the week of January 30th to February 3rd. Okay, so that's enough for this particular propaganda piece. If you want a little bit more of that punishment, you can go check out the CBC. But this is good. The CBC, even the CBC is saying we're having none of this. So maybe that's a good sign that if they do drag these guys in front of a committee this time, it'll actually go somewhere and have some teeth. Maybe. Either way, this is a good sign. Things are opening up. So here's the Globe and Fail, and they're saying Dominic Barton says he was unaware of McKinsey's role in sales of OxyContin. So this is a little history lesson. It's back in 2021, 11 February 2021. Just a reminder, that's what Robert Fife was referencing there. And so it may no longer be current. What's going on? I think I pulled this from the Wayback Machine, actually. I can't see it in my presentation style, but this might be all that's available. So yeah, I dug into the Wayback Machine and pulled this up. But Dominic Barton says he was unaware of McKinsey's role in the sales of OxyContin. I think that was okay. And over on the other side of the pond, of course, the WEF, or well, really the Davos crew, they're all getting together, and I didn't really bother covering this very much on the previous programs because it's kind of like everybody else is doing that, so it's pretty well covered. But I thought I'd show a couple of highlights here. Here's Avi Yemini, Rebel News, and he's saying, "I was just threatened to be punched out by CNBC's international managing editor for politely asking him simple questions. These are the thugs that want to control the world, but he doesn't scare me." Yeah, I bet he doesn't. Really? But you're here as an invited guest and you're an editor for CNBC. Don't you think that's a bit of a conflict of interest?
I'd like you to go away. I haven't agreed to an interview. If you're doorstepping me, like, go away. Seriously, take your mic out.
Don't touch the mic.
Away from me, brother.
You're meant to be speaking truth to power. Are you here just to take your marching orders? Is that what you're here for?
Do you want to go away?
Not really. I'm here to do what you should be doing.
Yeah? Please take this out of my mouth. I'm going to have you escorted off for security.
All right. Do that. There you go. CNBC. Their job is supposed to be doing what he's complaining I'm doing. And now he's calling security to escort me off the premises. Well,
and I threw this in here because you have Elon Musk chiming in on this too. He says your critique is spot on. So
what's the problem?
You're my problem. You've been very rude to me this morning. You haven't asked me anything, so I'd like you to take the camera off me.
I've literally asked you questions politely, which should be your job. That's your job, sir. I'm doing your job. I'm just not getting paid for by Klaus Schwab.
Okay. Great job to Avi Yemini, and he's from down under there, Australia. So he's been covering a lot of what's been going on down there. It was scary stuff. So here's the Hodge twins, and they're treating Rebel News with the flame. So here's Ezra, and I'm just going to let him do his thing here. It's pretty good.
Mr. Borla, can I ask you, when did you know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission? How long did you know that without saying it publicly?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Answer that question. I mean, we now know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission, but why did you keep it secret? You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
I won't have a nice day until I know the answer. Why did you keep it a secret that your vaccine did not stop transmission?
Is it time to apologize to the world, sir? To give refunds back to the countries that poured all their money into your vaccine that doesn't work, your ineffective vaccine?
Yeah, you have a little bit around.
Are you not ashamed of what you've done in the last couple of years?
Do you have any apologies to the public, sir?
Are you proud of it? You've made millions on the backs of people's entire livelihoods. How does that feel to walk the streets as a millionaire on the backs of the regular person at home in Australia, in England, in Canada?
What do you think about on your yacht, sir? What do you think about on your private jet? Are you worried about product liability? Are you worried about myocarditis?
What about the sudden deaths?
What do you have to say about young men dropping dead of heart attacks every day?
So that's pretty great stuff. This goes on for a few more minutes, but you get the idea. They're just relentless in their coverage here, Rebel News. So give them a shout out as always. And they have all kinds of people embedded. So if you really want to know more about what's going on in Davos, you can go check that out. It's kind of the usual stuff. The only thing I'll say is that George Soros, he's not there, and Klaus, he wasn't supposed to show up, but then he did, and he just kind of gave a speech or whatever. So just my overall impression right now is that there's not as much steam in this one as there has been in previous years. So, but my question,
why won't you answer these basic?
My question to Ezra is, why does he look like Matt Damon in Forgetting Sarah Marshall right now? Did he
basic questions?
Did he get some veneers or something? I'm not sure what's going on, but these are the things that I noticed, folks. So here we have Andrew Lawton. He says, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland refuses to answer my question about whether her trustee role with the World Economic Forum puts her in a conflict of interest as a cabinet minister. So well done, Andrew Lawton. Here we go.
Hi, Minister. Andrew Lawton, True North. I was just wondering if it's a conflict of interest for you to be a trustee while also a cabinet minister. Are you proud of the work? And if so, why is there an issue answering a question about it? Enjoy your panel, Minister.
Yep. Standard. So there's the Wicked Witch of the WEF being as responsive as ever. So here's Real Andy Lee show again, and she says, Chrystia Freeland at the WEF. Quote, I think we're going to win because our people, which is so often the case in democracy, people are smarter than their leaders. They understand we need to stand up for democratic values, close quote. She also laughed when protesters' bank accounts were frozen. Yeah, that's right. Wicked Witch of the WEF. And here we go.
Because our people, I think, which is so often the case in democracy, people are smarter than their leaders. Certainly speaking for Canada, Canadians got this on day one. They understand that we need to stand up for democracy and democratic values, but they also understand our economies, our security, the fact that nuclear deterrence actually works. All of these critical things are really being decided on the battlefields of Ukraine right now. Oh my God. So I am, of course, worried. We would be stupid not to be, but I am ultimately profoundly confident. Because our people,
oh my God. Okay. Just the usual kind of boilerplate gobbledygook. Canada's mom. She seems to think that she's our mom. And she's just, it's like she's talking to her children. She's got the mom head tilt all the time. So, and she uses the mom voice. So that we know that we're what? Good people? I don't know. I don't know what the hell it is. Okay, but this is why I think the Wicked Witch of the WEF needs to go Kiwi style here. So the Kiwis went full up totalitarian in all of this throughout the pandemic, and Jacinda Ardern is one of these young global leaders. So she's a kind of Trudeau figure, but female. So and then. Man, she was brutal. She was brutal throughout this whole thing. And I remember saying just a couple of podcasts ago how we were looking at what's going on down under with Australia, and they're, what was it they were doing? But we're saying we're about a couple of weeks behind them or a couple of months behind them. And New Zealand is kind of Australia, basically. But, they're their own country, and they're, just a small island nation. I think they got about 7 million population or 9 million, something like that. So it's not a huge country. And she absolutely tyrannized these people. And now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I didn't really see this coming. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Jacinda Ardern resigns as Prime Minister of New Zealand. Holy smokes. So Labour leader to stand down no later than 7 February, saying she no longer had enough in the tank to do the job. Okay, so...
announcing that I will not be seeking re-election, and that my term as Prime Minister will conclude no later than the 7th of February. This has been the most fulfilling 5.5 years of my life. I am leaving because with such a privileged role comes responsibility. The responsibility to know when you are the right person to lead and also when you are not. I know what this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It's that simple. I know there will be much discussion in the aftermath of this decision as to what the so-called real reason was. I can tell you that what I'm sharing today is it. The only interesting angle that you will find is that after going on 6 years of some big challenges, I am human. Politicians are human. We give all that we can for as long as we can, and then it's time. And for me, it's time. And that I'm looking forward to spending time with my family once again. Arguably, they're the ones that have sacrificed the most out of all of us. And so to Neve, Mum is looking forward to being there when you start school this year. And to Clark, let's finally get married. I want to finish with a simple thank you to New Zealanders for giving me this opportunity to serve and to take on what has and will always be the greatest role of my life. I hope in return, I leave behind a belief that you can be kind but strong, empathetic but decisive, optimistic but focused, that you can be your own kind of leader, one that knows when it's time to go.
Yeah, okay. Little Miss Empathy. Okay, so this is The Guardian, and they're reporting on this. I'll read a couple of lines here, but you get the idea. New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has said she is resigning in an unexpected announcement that came as she confirmed a national election for October. At the party's first caucus meeting of the year on Thursday, Ardern said, quote, no longer had enough in the tank, close quote, to do the job, quote, it's time, she added. So we just saw that. So it's a lot of quotes of the same thing, but this was unexpected, kind of out of left field. And geez, the 7th, like that's like 3 weeks away. So yeah, I mean, interesting times, folks, but like I've been saying, the signs that the dam is breaking, like they're all around the place. And if Australia, New Zealand are a kind of bellwether for where we're going as an anti-American former British colony, then this bodes well for us. And we have Trudeau. You know, I've covered this previously. He sent the emails out to activate all assets, get everybody kind of warmed up for potential spring elections. So you know, it could be a really positive thing. Okay, and here's Blacklock's reporter. They're dynamite, subscription based, but they're saying, quote, they've withheld these figures for 3 years. This memo is horrific, close quote. And this is a podcast. 2.7 million workers who lose livelihood due to climate change rules can work as janitors or truck drivers, says Fed memo, quote, key messages on just transition. This is the kind of anti-rural attitude, anti-redneck attitude, anti-roughneck attitude that you see in a very cosmopolitan, elitist culture like the Public Service of Canada in Ottawa. It's a big university town, ground zero for postmodernist wokeism, and yeah, there's a kind of contempt for the working classes and people who get dirty and have sore bodies at the end of the day for a living. And I think it's because they make more money, and the people in the public service, you know, they got to go after like 2 master's degrees just to get some director position or something. I mean, I don't think they have the retention anymore to really meet those standards, but yeah, yeah, this is really revealing some of the kind of bigotry. You know, it's a kind of bigotry at the highest levels. This elitism, this misology, as in anti-humanism. And here is the clip from the podcast that he's talking about.
However, this one also a really, really consequential, big headline that you guys found, and I think it's very telling. But this one coming from our friend, Natural Resource Minister Jonathan Wilkin, who says, well, the green economy it's going to require workers with green skills, but you can go on and be a janitor and truck driver, but they're looking at throwing out 2.7 million Canadians whose jobs are going to be disrupted by climate policy. So essentially, if you have a job that is not a green job, they are saying you either adapt, retrain, or you're gone.
It's blood-curdling, Alex. These are their figures. They have withheld these figures for 8 years when they talked about just transition to the workers' paradise under climate change programs. It's absolutely blood-curdling. You're talking about pretty much the industrial workforce in our country. These are the only private sector workers on the whole who have union benefits in Canada: food processing, manufacturing, oil and gas. You go down the list. And what's going to happen to these people when they go to enforce their emissions targets? And this memo from the Department of Natural Resources says, there will always be people in our country who can get a job even if they don't have green skills, as you mentioned. One of them might be janitor. Wouldn't that be great? You could push a broom, or you could drive a truck for a solar panel company. You know what? They didn't even get that right, Alex. Guess what? Concentration camps in China, this is a demonstrable fact, are one of the leading producers of polysilicon solar panels. They have been busted by U.S. Customs for using slave labor. You're not even going to get a job pushing a broom and a solar panel plant because we're never going to compete with Chinese slave labor on that. It's horrific, this memo.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be pointed out, and I don't know, maybe you can.
Okay, so well done by Black Locks Reporter there. You can go check them out too. Excuse me. But this is an element that I try to highlight on the program here, is this cosmopolitanism, where you have this out of touch, inept, and somehow hubristic class of elites, especially in the cosmopolitan areas, in the big cities, the kind of the university crowd I'm talking about now. Big cities, like, I know there are plenty of working class folks out there that, because Ottawa, in the 7 years that I lived there, was in a perpetual state of construction. It's almost like they never finished building the city or something. It's constant. And they just put a new rail in there, a light rail system, and it's a total boondoggle of a disaster, of course. So there are a lot of people working in the trades and stuff like that in the cities, but we're talking about the elites right now, and this element of the cosmopolitanism is something that I think Huxley does a really good job of illustrating in Brave New World, where he's really kind of focused on the people who are in the echo chamber and what it's like for them, where, there's this exploitation of their fellow humans going on all around them, but they are the beneficiaries of that exploitation, and they're just sort of taking drugs to numb themselves out and go into orgies. And the sexualization of children was also another aspect of tyranny that I think Huxley did a wonderful job of highlighting. But with the cosmopolitan component of it, that's what I observed during my time there, was this kind of contempt for these hardworking folks who maybe get certifications in industry. Like, I know there are all kinds of different certificate programs you can go through. Like, you could be a power engineer or something working in an oil field, and if you've got whatever it is, the fourth class or the first class, I'm not sure which way it goes. I think it's first class. If you've got a first class ticket, like, that's a lot of school, and that's something that you learn as you go. But because it's not a degree program like the folks in Ottawa or a place like that might do, where in Ottawa, you just take one bus to get to university, and then you take another bus to get to your cushy public service job. And, when other people are complaining that something you're doing is creating challenges in their lives, they're sitting there kind of like, well, I don't have any challenges. My state is very good to me. And, I saw something on War Campaign where they ran into a guy in the street in Ottawa like this, and it was very much like, I love Big Brother. That's basically what I was hearing this guy say, which is the line from Winston Smith at the end of 1984, after he's tortured and conditioned, and O'Brien makes him perfect. He realizes that he loves Big Brother. He can't help it. So, and there's I know I'm kind of combining the tyranny of the pain with the tyranny of the pleasure here, but the tyranny of the pleasure. Yeah, I hear this guy on War Campaign talking about his experience with Ottawa and the state, and he's just a native-born Ottawa boy that who's kind of like, oh, I don't care if they want to spy on my phone. And Rowan asked him, well, what if you're doing like some sexy time with a lady or something? Do you want them seeing that? So I thought that was spot on. And anyway, the guy was kind of like, oh no, we can trust the state. Our state is good. My state is benevolent. I love Big Brother. So yeah, and there's that contempt for the common man that kind of flows from that. They don't like this idea that people can kind of work their way up in life without jumping through all the same hoops that they did. And the fact that I think a lot of these working trades and industry certified fields produce things that also bothers them. Like there's something to be said about the fact that there's this value added to the whole society by the kind of work that resource development does for Canada, that these people actually do for Canada. They're the lifeblood. And so I think there's a kind of resentment there, a little bit of Cain versus Abel taking place where, envy is the deadly sin. And so they want to destroy these people's way of lives, whether they will even admit that to themselves, maybe another matter. But yeah, and they have this attitude like, oh, well, they can just be truck drivers or janitors, as in peasants, serfs, servants, because that's how they see them. If they're not, the elitist crowd with the fancy degrees, then they're the serf class, and they can drive our solar panels around and mop our floors, not produce anything, as in develop resources. And a rising tide floats all boats, obviously. So that's why we enjoy such a high standard of living. It's a big part of why we enjoy such a high standard of living here in Canada, is because of our access to natural resources provided courtesy of all those folks out there working in the oil patch and beyond, not just Alberta. I know Saskatchewan, potash, and all kinds of stuff too. So anyway, yeah, that's my take on that. I think there's a kind of cultural, the elitist, a constituent, I think, of the elitist mindset is contempt for the common man, and that's being revealed through this memo. And here's Spencer Fernando. It says former Liberal Finance Minister Bill Morneau criticizes Trudeau for divisive use of vaccine mandates. So speaking of elitist swamp creatures, here's Bill Morneau, trust fund baby. And he gave us the WE scandal, the WE charity scandal. We gave them, wasn't it like, they dialed it back. First it came out, it was, they were giving them $1 trillion, and then they were like, no, it's 500 billion. Or am I getting that mixed up? It's insane. But anyway, they were giving them all kinds of money for nothing, looting the public coffers while we're all scared of the pandemic. And I think what they're doing here is they're trying to float Bill Morneau as a potential, as a viable option to Trudeau. So anyway, Spencer Fernando, he's a right-wing guy. He's pretty good. So he says, imagine if the high-level officials criticized government while still in power. Former Liberal Finance Minister Bill Morneau has leveled his criticism at PM Trudeau for using vaccine mandates as a divisive wedge issue. In a recent interview touting his new book, Morneau said Trudeau using vaccine mandates to divide Canadians during the last election wasn't, quote, helpful, close quote. That's an understatement. It was borderline genocidal in my view, and I did a video on that to that effect. There, it's called the politics of genocide. Back to the article. Quote, when you react to social media, when you react quickly to the 24/7 news cycle, you find yourself taking decisions, saying things that exacerbate the strongly held opinions of people who are putting out these points of view, close quote, said Morneau. The decision in, quote, the decision in the last election campaign to use the vaccine mandate as a wedge issue, I didn't see that as something that was helpful, close quote, he added. Morneau's criticism of Trudeau is relatively tepid, but that fits with Morneau's Bay Street button-down style. The fact that he made these criticisms at all is notable, as Morneau's remarks echo what Trudeau's political opponents have long been saying. While Trudeau postures as a unifier, his approach has become more and more divisive longer he's been in power. A combination of arrogance, ignorance, contempt for disagreement, and a dangerously utopian vision has eroded Trudeau's support over time. Thus, quote, sunny ways, close quote, has turned into a divisive wedge issue after another, one divisive wedge issue after another, with the most divisive of all being employed in the 2021 election. How about saying these things while in office? If Morneau felt this way about Trudeau's divisive approach, it's likely other Limbo MPs and cabinet ministers did as well. Unfortunately, we will only really see people speak up once they have left. Imagine if Morneau had spoken out more critically of Trudeau while in office. Imagine if, despite no longer being in the government, Morneau spoke out forcefully during the 2021 election when Trudeau was dividing Canadians. Those criticisms would have held a lot more weight if made in a timely fashion, rather than during an attempt to sell a book. Canada's political system still remains far too leader-dominated and centralized, and that dissuades people from speaking out even when they have serious ethical concerns about the direction of the government. That's why we should continue to push for our political system to be more decentralized and more power to individual MPs, rather than making everyone so beholden to the opinion of one person at the top. That's true on both sides of the aisle. I just want to point that out. And they've been throwing everybody under the bus. Like, you come in second place in a leadership campaign in the CPC. One would think that the strategy would be to try to bring you in close and address the concerns that led to your popularity that's coming from the base, but that's not what they do. They toe an ideological line, and dissenters are cut out, whether you're Maxime Bernier or Derek Sloan. Okay, so and that's the kind of with us or against us boomer leadership that we see across the board right now. Think George W. Bush. You're with us or against us, right? As we were saying, such a system is controlled by somebody like Justin Trudeau, who lacks the qualities of a leader. The damage can be quite profound. Okay, so thanks a lot to Spencer Fernando for that commentary. He's pretty good. Go check him out. And here we have Bill Morneau names Dominic Barton, head of the McKinsey & Co. to Government Economic Advisory Board. So this is the one from the Wayback Machine I had to go digging for. But this is February 23rd, 2016. It says Dominic Barton. Oh, sorry. And it's the Financial Post. And it says Dominic Barton, the new head of the Liberal government's Economic Advisory Council, honed his leadership expertise in Asia and offers clues about the economic direction the government could be taking in the coming years. So that's all the way back to 2016. And here's Dominic Barton bringing us in under the wing of that Chinese dragon. So Dominic Barton, the new head of the Liberal government's Economic Advisory Council, honed his leadership expertise in Asia, and his appointment Monday offers clues about the economic direction the government could be taking in the coming years. Barton is the head of the global consulting giant McKinsey & Co., a famously discreet and prestigious management firm that consults some of the world's largest corporations. Finance Minister Bill Morneau announced his appointment to the council in his financial update, with further appointees to be named shortly. A source close to Barton, who spoke on background, I think, and anonymity is what they mean, said the executive field calls from everyone to, quote, the Vatican to the Iranian government. He is one of the most connected people in the world, the source told the Financial Post. He added that most are surprised to learn that he is Canadian. Most of the executives in similar roles are often Americans or Europeans with deep global connections. Well, I know that's just a little stroke on the ego for Canadians there. Look at our guy go, something like this. But we're talking about a very accomplished swamp creature here who obviously has a lot of influence, at least in Beijing. And he's kind of steering things from behind the scenes. And this is what we see, I think, when I'm talking about, the art of war, and I mentioned chapter 13, the use of spies. That's what it's called. It's called the use of spies. And they do things like they turn people to be, and they could do it economically through bribery or just, these business relationships. They could do it through blackmail, through anything. And and we have Tom Quiggin, V4F's intelligence officer, who talks about elite capture a lot as a kind of phenomenon that we're seeing right now, is that our elites, our elite class has been captured by foreign powers, essentially. And, I'm pointing to China as the center of gravity in all of this. Russia's a factor as well. Well, as we can see, here we have Dominic Barton, who might as well, he probably does have an office over there in Beijing somewhere. So all of it is quite ominous in that regard. But at the same time, I don't know. They're trying to get Morneau out there as some kind of a counterweight to Justin Trudeau. Maybe he's the one who can take us back in the right direction. But as Spencer Fernando points out, the whole problem is that we have this kind of spineless leadership at the top, where none of our leaders are really saying no to any of the powerful people out there. And that's really what our politics is supposed to do. They're supposed to be our representatives. And I say they're middle management, but that's just a functional term. And it's only functional really at this moment in the current moment in our history right now, in the fourth turning. Because, the people that we're sending to Ottawa to keep that state, to keep the public service in check, and to meet with the lobbyists, to hear the concerns of industry, but at the same time not be led by them, because you're a political leader. You're the one who's supposed to be leading. You take these inputs and you make your assessments, logically, balance the harms, these kinds of things. But that's not what they're doing. Justin Trudeau himself says that he takes his marching orders from the highly professional public service. So that's the chief of the Privy Council office. That's his national security advisor, Jody Thomas. So, that's the opposite of what a political leader is supposed to do. He's supposed to take those inputs from the public service the same way that he would from a corporation, essentially, because every one of these entities have their own self-interests. Whether the public service is no less human than the rest of us. So these are all massive powers in our society that need to be balanced, and we need to put checks on those powers. And the check is supposed to be your elected representative. But as we see at this particular moment, with our elected representatives doing is they're taking their cues from guys like Dominic Barton, who seems to be all over the place, moving things from behind the scenes, and he's got his tentacles into the public service, awarding him contracts. And he's a pretty big pro-Beijing kind of guy. So watch out for this guy. This is something, I'm just going to mention it now because I'm getting over on my time. I've been pretty good to keep it at least under an hour and a half. But Crowder is back out there, and he's calling out Big Con. I don't know. I don't really know. It looks like a lot of drama on this side, and I don't really want to do a deep dive. So for those of you who know Crowder, go check out his channel. He's there on YouTube. He's still trying to push the YouTube channel, I guess. But he's talking about a contract that he's getting that's very, very burdensome, I guess. And he's kind of he's saying that the people trying to do startups these days, especially in the conservative side, they, you would think that going to a conservative media outlet and dealing with them, they would want to, facilitate your success and stuff like this. But it just seems like they're being, really hard line with a lot of the financial commitments and penalties. So anyway, I think I'm going to forego that for now. But as it turns out, he doesn't mention who this conservative outlet is in the video, but it turns out it's the Daily Wire. So here's Viva Frey, and he's saying the real Daily Wire explains their side of the Crowder saga. Notice the subtle emphasis on when Daily Wire refers to it as a non-binding, confidential term sheet We'll talk about it today, but feeling better about my assessment from yesterday. Okay, so I'm not sure. What was his assessment from yesterday? It might be short notice for tonight, but I think a lot of people would love the sidebar with Stephen Crowder. What do you say, Mr. Crowder? So he's trying to get him on V4F. Check out Viva. He's been pretty good, throughout this whole thing. Bit of a, he's a Montreal boy, so he tends to be a little bit dismissive towards the rural guys, as the city boys often are. He's a lawyer, but yeah, the Daily Wire. When I first saw the Crowder thing, I was thinking, okay, is he talking about Fox News here? Because if it's Fox News and it's corporate, and I can see a whole discussion here about the boomer investment class and so on and so forth. But this is Daily Wire, and they are a response to a lot of the big corporate Fox News type stuff. And Daily Wire is pretty new as a kind of corporate entity, as they're doing movies and TV shows and kids shows and books and all kinds of stuff now. So go ahead and check out those videos if you want. Viva seems to be pretty good here for posting them both up on his Twitter. So it looks like a kind of a nothing burger to me, so I'm not going to do a deep dive into it. But I saw a few people chatting about it. A lot of people like Crowder, especially. So, and here is a little bit on the vaccine stuff. We're putting this at the end of the show so we can kind of drop off on the censorship platforms. Quebec man's COVID vaccine story spurs others to come forward. So this is the CBC. You want to talk about signs of positive things to come. This is January 17th. Canadians who say they suffered adverse reactions dealing with silence, stigma. Yeah, you don't say. The story of a Gatineau, Quebec man who developed a debilitating skin condition after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine has struck a chord with many Canadians, dozens of whom reached out to share their own similar experiences. Shortly after Tisir Otabaki received his second dose of the Moderna vaccine in August of 2021, a burning rash that had started on his hands spread to his limbs and back, forcing him to quit his jobs and seek medical treatment in Ontario. Otabachi is now seeking redress through Quebec's Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. According to the Public Health Agency of Canada, only a tiny fraction, 0.011%, of the more than 95 million vaccine doses administered by the country as of December 9th resulted in serious adverse reactions, but that's still more than 10,000 reported cases. I'm skeptical of anything that the Public Health Agency of Canada has to say on that, especially remember the kind of loose definitions they were using for vaccinated in the early pandemic. So if we're trying to determine, if somebody was injured as a result of the shot, we wouldn't really be able to tell that from the statistics that they were releasing back in the day, because they didn't consider them to be vaccinated until after they were boosted, and you had like 2 weeks for the vaccine to really kick in, and then they would start counting adverse reactions. So if you died, between getting your first shot and when you would have been considered, fully vaccinated, then that wouldn't factor into those statistics on vaccine deaths and vaccine injuries. So, Otabachi had never experienced any skin problems before, told CBC that throughout this ordeal, most of the doctors who examined him dismissed the possibility of any link between the vaccine and the sudden onset of this painful condition. We've been talking like maybe it's shingles. People have been reporting that a lot, and this is in line with a lot of the things that I've been saying about the immunosuppressive effects of the vaccine. Fauci even said that they spliced in a little bit of HIV to improve the mRNA uptake in the cells. So if you're a carrier for something like shingles, you might not know it your entire life because your immune system is working. But once it's suppressed, it starts to manifest and people show symptoms like this. And I'm not a doctor or a scientist or any of these things. I'm a layman across the board. I don't have a degree in anything. I'm just a concerned citizen, and I'm a military veteran, so I try to give it a little bit of that hawkish perspective that is, characteristic of the veteran perspective. So, quote, I told him that it's not against the vaccine, but the vaccine damaged my body, close quote, he said. Quote, the doctors that I have been to, all of them were scared, close quote. Health units monitoring reactions, according to Earl Brown, a professor emeritus of virology at the University of Ottawa, certain elements of the vaccines can trigger an autoimmune response that targets our own tissues. Imagine that in the CBC. Quote, you've got a lot of people who have developed antibodies to the vaccine components because they're used everywhere in medicine or cosmetics in our food, close quote. Brown told the CBC last week, quote, most of us do very well, but some of us are getting adverse reactions, close quote. Well, many of those who reached out after reading Otabachi's story said they've also had a difficult time convincing doctors that the COVID vaccine may have caused their skin condition. Ottawa's medical officer of health, Vera Etchies, told CBC Radio's Ottawa Morning last week that medical professionals are encouraged to report all suspected cases. Quote, we want to understand the full range of what can happen with vaccines, close quote, Etchies said. Quote, we know these kinds of things are extremely rare, but we have a system for reporting so that we can find rare things and assist people, close quote. And yeah, I mean, so there's this other factor of the medical professionals being afraid and being suppressed, and also, being dismissive of people pointing to the vaccine as a potential cause of their symptoms. So this would be underreported for all of those reasons. These kinds of things would be underreported as vaccine injuries for all of these reasons. And if this is being discussed in the CBC, I think the rats are leaving this sinking ship, folks. They are they see the writing on the wall. There's more of us than there are of them, and they don't want to be the ones. They don't want to get mobbed. I think they're starting to hedge their bets. And I'm being facetious, obviously, with that, but they're starting to hedge their bets. They're starting to leave that sinking ship and say, hey, I was one of the ones who pointed to all this wrongdoing. Look at this article. But they still throw in this. Overall, of course, we know the vaccines are providing a great benefit in protecting people from severe outcomes of COVID-19. Okay, so it's still a crack in the dam, but it's a big crack. That's a big crack in the dam right there. So I am encouraged to see that. And I am up on the 136, but as you can see, we're back to Diogenes one more time. Of what use is a philosopher who doesn't hurt anybody's feelings? So that's one of our founding philosophers of cynicism, which is one of our founding philosophies in the West. That's anyway, I think it behooves us all to take heed of that advice. I think the ancients kind of had this stuff figured out way back when. We'll take a lens of cynicism to anything that we see out there in the media, regardless of where it's coming from, really. And this is how we manage to keep a cool head through all of these things. I'm going to throw to a couple of comments here before we throw off. Patricia's saying the CEO of Pfizer admitted that they wanted the population down by 50%. I don't know that I saw that personally, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. The one that got me was, I think it was actually the CFO. It was a female, and she was saying confirming what I had been saying. I said from day one that the term vaccine is a branding term. The mRNA itself is not like any kind of a therapy that we've seen on the market before. And she said that they called it a vaccine because if they told everybody that it was a gene therapy, then they wouldn't have taken it. She was like open about it. And it's the kind of, we know what's best for the little people sort of attitude. Colleen is saying, thanks, great job. And Darlene is saying, thanks for the podcast, Jeff. Informative as always. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Hugs to all. All right. Positive vibes out there. This is great. And Marie is saying, thank you, Jeff. And I don't see any trolls in here today. It's been pretty good as far as the trolls go, and that probably has everything to do with the fact that we're being suppressed too. But as I keep saying, guys, things are starting to turn, and we're seeing signs of that everywhere. I think people are really waking up to just the level of deep corruption at the highest levels right now. So that's positive, and hopefully we can push through this fourth turning without going to a world war. But yeah, we'll stay tuned for more developments on that one. I think so. You know, that's kind of what I've been saying is, you know, lawful civic action, peaceful action, overwhelm the state. Like democracy itself is supposed to be set up as a bulwark to revolution. And that's what happens over and over again with these Towers of Babel is a class of elites comes along that's just so out of touch and can't understand why anybody might be complaining while they're in charge because they're so self-righteous and narcissistic. And everything just kind of falls apart if there's no feedback mechanism. And in ancient times, that's what would happen was the masses would revolt and overthrow the leadership, and very often eat them or you know even execute them in the cases of like the French Revolution. So democracy is supposed to be that feedback mechanism. Any system is unstable without that feedback mechanism. And at this particular moment, it's just kind of being ignored where it wasn't before. And we got to take the lessons learned from this crisis and build more safeguards against tyranny into our democratic institutions so that, you know, future generations will be able to come out of this kind of thing with even less harm, or hopefully we don't have to go into this this kind of a crisis era again if we understand the root cause. And I'm pointing to the rearing of children as the root cause, and the indulging of children, actually, as specifically that commie bastard Dr. Spock destroyed the West. All right, so with that, folks, I'll say stay frosty and stay safe out there.